Good morning and welcome to this week's recruitment discussion with Jump. And this week we're looking at start owning your marketplace, the intelligence model that makes you irreplaceable. This is a session on how you become the person your clients call before they have a vacancy, and build a business that your competitors can't touch. And as always, if you're viewing on YouTube, Jump would love you to subscribe. So hit that subscribe button, work from there. And as always, let's start the session off with, I'm going to share 4 facts with you today. And these are not opinions. These are numbers that will tell you exactly why this conversation really matters right now. According to the UK recruiters, they now receive on average 22 applications for every single vacancy. And I thought that number was very, very low. However, if we're honest, even that number is more than any one person can really meaningfully read, screen, and shortlist by hand. And what we've got to think is AI is already doing a huge share of that work. So that exact function, most agencies build their entire value proposition on finding and filtering candidates quickly. And that job is now being done automated, and it's faster and quicker and probably better than you can provide it for. The second one, which I thought was a very interesting fact, 59% of UK businesses use recruitment agencies to secure talent. That means 41% of businesses out there do not use agency. So there's an opportunity in itself if ever there was one. Yet, 16% of employers and employees report a positive experience with those agencies. Really repeat that in your head. 59% of UK businesses use agency. Only 16% of them report a positive effect. That's the bigger opportunity. That's the market for what you do. And that market hasn't disappeared. What's happened is the market for how agencies do it has now become or just run out of patience. They're just not interested in what we do at the moment. And that's the gap, and that's a real threat. But that's the biggest opportunity I think we can see ourselves today. Third one, almost 60% of decision makers say a piece of thought leadership directly led them to award business to a company, not a 10-year relationship, not the cheapest fee, a piece of content that provided a company that actually understood their marketplace. So if you're not putting your market knowledge in front of your clients and prospecting that with that information right now, leaving the easiest new business channel available to you completely open and untouched. And the fourth one, which is an interesting one compared to what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, AI used by HR and recruitment tasks climbed, should I say, not claimed, climbed by 26% in 2024. However, it's now at 43% in 2026. So that's not a slow creep of what AI is doing. That has doubled in 2 years. So whatever part of your business still relies purely on being the fastest at finding candidates, then if you're competing with the agency down the road and they're using AI, then you've got a shrinking window. And that is what it's all about. So I've put all the notes and all the for those stats in the chat. Today I'm joined by Dave. So Dave, welcome. So I'm going to sort of open up, and I'm going to open up with the intelligent question, Dave. So,
oh no, don't start with intelligence.
I'm going to say, I think we're both going to struggle on this one. So, what is the market intelligence most recruitment leaders are already generating every single week and just throwing away without realizing it?
And it's funny, isn't it, because I was thinking about this. It's the basics of what we do that we take for granted that actually we forget that we know what's going on in the market. So we know about people movement. We know about salaries and rates. We know from conversations that we're having with candidates that for the most part, still, in my experience, often go unrecorded. Either agencies aren't making use of AI and capturing the notes of the conversations and putting it onto the system, but within those conversations is an amazing amount of rich information and data. And that knowledge is what differentiates the really good agencies from the excellent agencies. And given that there are still, as you say, when there's 22, 29 jobs per application, it's a lot of a lot of work to do to get back to the candidates. But the ones that do it really, really well, the ones that capture the intelligence are the ones that are going to win out. There's no question that we are the purveyors. We're the ones that sit in the middle between the client and the candidate. And the stuff that we do every day, the conversations that we capture, the intelligence that we capture, what's going on the projects, what's coming up, all of that is vital information for us, where it's not confidential, to be able to share with prospects and clients.
It was interesting when I wrote this question. I had so many different ways that I wrote it, and one of the things I put: if your consultant stopped talking to candidates tomorrow, you would lose access to the most valuable data in your business.
Yeah.
But then that said, but would you then even notice it? Okay. And I think every call your consultants make produce three things: a salary number, a piece of competitor intelligence, and a read on whether the client's plans have changed and can you fill this job, etc. And almost none of those type of things are written down on a CRM or put into a CRM. Your CRM already holds sort of 12 months of salary data. If you're putting it in there, it puts 12 months of time to hire. It gives reasons for rejections and things like that. But most leaders have never actually pulled any of that information from a CRM. And every candidate conversation tells you why people are leaving jobs right now. And that is data that most market research firms would actually pay an awful lot of money for. And you're sitting on it. And, market data is, I think you're giving it away for free in a 5-minute phone call, and you're getting it all, but we're never writing it down, and therefore we're never using it properly to sell intelligence to our clients. So if you ask leaders all of these sort of things, when did you last send a client something that they knew rather than something that you were trying to sell? That's a very different conversation, because I think people forget what you're selling, but they remember something that they sell, that you send them, that they can use. So like a salary survey, market information on why people are leaving. And that intelligence isn't missing. What is missing is the habit of capturing it. If your consultants already had that conversation, but you've just never asked them to record it, or you haven't created your CRM to record it properly. And in most cases, that's what happens. Most CRMs aren't there and built to capture the data because you haven't put a field in to capture the data. People get bored filling it out. They don't understand what importance it has. So I think the agency who do this well treat every placement as a chance to learn something about the marketplace. It's not just to close a fee. And I think that's the ones that then start to progress in the marketplace, because you're giving intelligence to your clients. It's not a conversation about recruitment. And I think that's a very different place to be. So let's put that into the service point of view then. If a leader wanted to turn their consultants, or what their consultants already know, into something that they could call a client service, what does that actually look like in practice? Not in theory, but what does that look like in practice?
Well, for me, where I've seen it work really well is when the leader hasn't come in one day on a Monday morning or a Tuesday or whatever and said, right, from now, everybody's going to do this. What they do, they pick one or two consultants and they say, right, from this week, I'd like you to write a report based on the conversations you've had with the market. They could be client conversations, they could be candidate conversations, and put it into a report that we will brand. One of my clients called the brand they've used is What's Happening. And it goes out to, I think in their world, about 150 different clients in a product area that they supply to. And then they follow that up with, based on that invitation, we're going to have a round table where we will get a number of clients together or a number of candidates together, and we'll talk about it. And from that produces another reports and more content, so stuff they can put out on YouTube or on a webinar or whatever. But they just start with one or two people, because not everybody wants to do it, even though they should and they can, but some need training. So I think getting into the habit of taking the data and making it into business intelligence, and then branding that business intelligence so it gives your brand and your company the authority that says, this is what's going on in the market, this is what we see. And it's not even about promoting your brand deliberately. It's just that your companies, if we were doing it, how Jump says this is what it sees in the market. And it gives you a resonance and a luster to your brand that says, actually, these are advisory people. And we've always said about the new recruitment consultant, the consultant bit of recruitment is as important as the recruiter bit. You've got to be the one that your clients and your candidates turn to say, what's going on? What are the trends? Where are we going?
I think I wrote last week in my newsletter last week the 95% versus 5%. The 95% is what every recruitment agency does, and they all do it the same to some degree. It's the 5% that's different, and this is the bit of part of the 5% that we're talking about. And I think most leaders think that they need a research team, a marketing team, or some subscription tool to actually get all this information, when all it needs is a template and discipline to fill it in daily and capture it every month or every quarter, then look at how you're going to put it out into the marketplace. And so I think if we're going to start to do this, what it looks like, I think it start with one thing. And I would probably start with a quarterly or monthly salary benchmark for the 3 roles that you place the most. That's a document. You don't need a department to do that. It's a document. And I think then the second thing I'd start to do is talent mapping. We're already doing that when we do candidate searches, but actually what we're doing is not writing that up and then sharing that information with the client before they start to ask for it. So knowing your candidate marketplace will really help you develop your client and determine if the role is worth working, or more importantly, if it's worth walking away from. We need to stop being busy fools because, that's not a strategy, but that's what a lot of people think is a strategy. And I think sector insights can be simple. Here's what we're seeing, the change in the market. Here's what candidates are saying. Here are the top things that have been our clients are saying, etc. Are very simple and all probably recorded in the notes that you make with your clients. So the businesses that do that well don't wait for permission from their clients. They're already sending that out to their clients, and that sort of speaks volumes for themselves.
Yeah.
If the data is compelling enough, they will call you. And I know that for a fact that, when I was in my own recruitment agency, when we started to put information out that was compelling, clients started to call us. And we were doing a little video every Friday for blockchain news. And we had clients calling up and saying, why aren't you talking about my products on blockchain news?
Okay, yeah.
It was really, really potent and really powerful. So I think pick the clients you most want to keep, start with them. Don't need it for every client, but it should be going to every client. But it also should be going to your candidates as well. And I think format matters less than consistency. Get your format right and then make it consistent. A simple 1 pager every quarter beats if you're not doing anything, but then make it more consistent, make it more regularly. And if you can't describe what your market intelligence service is in one sentence, then you don't have a service. You have an idea that you've never finished. And I think that's the bit that we start to think about is that, we have all these ideas. We can do this, we can do this, we can do this. It stays on a bit of paper and it never comes off that bit of paper. So what's the difference between an agency that's well known in its sector and one that is actually seen as the authority? And most leaders think that that's the same thing.
Yeah, and it's absolutely not, because this is a great question, because it's a distinction that matters for things like pricing power, inbound flow, the leads that are coming, and actually how clients behave with you. And for me, the difference is simple. To be known means that people can place you. Oh, I know Howard. Yeah, he works for Jump, he does this. But to be an authority means people defer to you before they make a decision. I'll phone Jim at X agency. So it's great to be known, because in recruitment, with LinkedIn and everything that's available to us, loads of people are known. But the authority is the one where the clients come to you and ask your opinion, ask your advice, ask for some information. So a well-known agency can get recognized, but an authority gets called first. Yeah, and they often get called alone. I've got clients who I know that their clients don't do anything to do with workforce planning, workforce strategy, workforce management without having a conversation. For example, before I go and look for these skills, or before I go and look for this in the market, what's going on in the market? You've been in it for 20 years. You've been placing candidates, you've been talking to candidates, what's going on in the market? And that's authority. And that's what the quality leaders and the quality agencies should be looking for. Because otherwise, to your point earlier, Howard, you're one of the 95%. And even as one of the 95%, you can be doing fine. But if you're one of the 5% that has the authority, then that will really add value to your business. It will protect your pricing. Why should you charge more if you're providing the same service as everybody else? And often you'll find that if you're the authority, the client initiates the contact. They're not waiting for you to call; they call you to find out what's going on.
I was just about to add that to the end of your conversation, saying we talk about BD quite a lot, and I think being well known, people recognise your name. Authority means that they call you.
Yeah.
When things change, the first doesn't create a conversation, but the second does. And I think authority is built on being right about something before it was obvious, and it helps clients to create a better informed decision making process. And being known is built on being known is built on being around for a long time. But that doesn't mean to say that you've got the knowledge of what's going on in the marketplace, because the market changes consistently. And I keep talking to my clients about being the key person of influence in the marketplace and using a framework. And it's about being the person with the point of view, not just a present. And most agencies have a present, but they have no point of view. And I think it's having a point of view that makes it different. And yeah, I look at some of the agencies that we talk to and work with, etc., and they're some of the biggest names in the sector. And you can still be completely replaceable because you're a known, but you're not an authority. And someone smaller in the marketplace, even solos, can come in and take that because they've got more authority in the marketplace. And it's that authority that makes you irreplaceable. And most leaders have never built that on purpose. So I think you ask yourself a question. In fact, ask your clients and your candidates a question: are you known as the key persons of influence, or are you just known in the marketplace? And those two answers will give you a view of how clients see you, and therefore how clients teach you. So being known gets you on a PSL, but being the authority gets you the call before that PSL even comes out. And most leaders confuse that longevity with authority. 10 years in the market means nothing if you've never said anything in the market that people remember. And that's the bit when you say something, they remember it.
Yeah, I remember being on a call with a number of other agencies with a client for a big piece of work, and there were 6 agencies on it, and the client said, "I just want to speak to James Ack." And what do you think, James? And James he was from another agency, gave a very articulate answer. It was intelligent. We were all writing down what he said. It was really good. And then but then he didn't ask anybody else. The other 5 of us were in that situation of, actually, the client is going to James first. And it was a salutary lesson in, the client knew who he was going to ask to give the update on the market and what was going on.
So it was interesting. I remember doing this in my own agency, and a bit of computer people and what have you. And I had people saying we need to write posts before posts. Well, let's get it all with information and data that clients can use. And everyone said, well, how do we know if it's working or not? We can't really track all of this. And I said, you'll know when your clients start repeating that information back to you. And oh my God, after about 3 or 4 months, people going, oh my God, I just spoke to a client. They got that, really liked that part. I really got that interesting. I really found that really interesting. And that closes the gap between, being authoritative and being a specialist where you have a loyal following who come talk to you, rather than being just well known and recognized where people will call you just in case they need something, etc. And I think there's a vast difference that we haven't really grasped yet that works with that. Here's another one then about the small agencies versus large agencies, because this is a conversation that's coming up quite a lot at the moment. So for leaders who are running a solo business, or even a sort of 5 to 10 type business with no spare capacity, how do you actually build this without hiring a research team that you can't really afford?
It's such a good question, because everybody in the market is talking about how do I do research? How do I make this happen? And I think the honest answer is that authority isn't built on volume. It's built through concentration. It's built through leverage. It's built through what you already know. So a few principles that absolutely work. Capture what you already know. Don't go out and do research on something you don't know a lot about or that is going to require a lot of time. To the point we were talking about earlier, our candidates, our clients, our intelligence, we've got a lot of that already. We don't need to go and research the market to find out what's going on. Often we know what's going on. And that could be corralling the team you've got and picking on two or three aspects of the business, of the market, and using that. So pick on what you've already got rather than generating something new. My experience, and I don't know whether this is true for you, but one format done consistently absolutely beats many formats done occasionally. So I mean, I've sat with many chief executives who have thought, oh, we haven't done any marketing. We'll use that phrase. So haven't done any marketing. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Whereas if you have a consistent report, a consistent data set, a consistent way of informing the market, that consistency over time generates loyalty, generates the sort of interaction you want with the client. And where you can, and it doesn't break client confidentiality, I would turn client knowledge into public intelligence. We use what's going on in the market, tell the world what's going on, because you'll be the authority if you're the ones doing it. And that way, you don't have to go and spend a lot of money on research. And the company you use to research, some of them will be very good, of course they will. But some of them may be just telling you what you already know. You just haven't been able to find out what you've already got.
So I think, yeah, I've looked at this quite a lot recently, and I'm starting to come to sort of the understanding of how I would run this now if I was running my own business. You don't need headcount. What you need is 15 minutes a week from every consultant logging the one thing that they have learned. That's your research team. And if you're a solo business, then that's you. And
That's you, yeah.
I think it's using your CRM data or that you already have before you go looking for anything new. Most leaders have got years and years of unused intelligence sitting in their own system, but they don't realize that other people want to see that. And I think one person, even a business leader, can own pulling this all together. It doesn't need a team. It just needs smart ways of working to do it. And if you had your CRM set up to put this information in, you could then extract that from your CRM and then just stick it in a chat GTP type scenario, and it'll write your stuff for you, but it's your intelligence. And I think small agencies, in the room have more real time market data and access to that information than any analyst firm or any of the large recruitment agencies, because the larger recruitment agencies, the bigger the agency, the less the consultants are really interested in that data, because they get so much data given to them by their intelligence teams and things like that. So I think you've got to treat it like an asset, because that's what an analyst firm would do. They'd treat it like an asset, and they would gather that information daily and use it daily. We don't treat it like an asset. We just treat it like it's something we've got to do, and it's a bit of a pain to do. So I think, start with the time your team already spends on calls with clients and candidates, the conversations they have that they're not adding to the system. Start capturing that. And builders should be the ones driving this in the small business, because nobody else has the authority to insist that that actually happens. And it's back to habit and creating habit. So don't wait until you're big enough to afford a research team, because all that data is going into your system somehow or somewhere, or it's going into someone's head, or it's sat on your email box. We just need to start to learn how to mine it and mine it properly. So if you think you're too small to build this, then what you're admitting is that you're too small to compete with agencies that are already building this type of information. And in the long term, those agencies that will inherit the clients that are worth inheriting, because the clients that go out and seek that information so they can make better informed decisions are the ones that you actually want to be working with, rather than the ones that just treat you like a suspect.
And just a tip that we used to use. you will be signed up to many, many client information portals or trends that are going on in the sector. If you're in the fintech sector, there's lots of free information that comes out that the companies, the research companies that do the information are happy for you to use as long as you reference it. A tip would be, here's a piece of market data, market research from a fintech organization. This is our take on it. So you're referencing the research that's already been done, pricey, but solid business intelligence. This is what we're seeing. And all you're doing is taking something you've already got and adding your sheen to it, but it gives you that authority. And often it associates you with a very impressive, proper research team that's happy for you to use it. As long as you reference them, you're not stealing anything. And I think if you can do that, I think that's another way of not spending a lot of money but getting a bit more back in the market.
Okay. So this next question isn't meant to be a sell of our services, but it will evolve into something around our services. And it's not meant to really, but that's how it's going to read. Okay. If a leader has no real 3-year vision or business plan, just a number that they like to hit, what's the most dishonest thing that they can do in the next 30 days that would feel like progress, but actually isn't?
That's a strong word, isn't it? Dishonest. I know what you mean. I think if you've got a number and the number is the thing, then just to focus on that number, you're selling yourself short. Whether you focus on it for 5 days or 30 days, because you know that you need a proper plan, and then you work back from that plan to what you do in ideally in the 3 years. What does 2 years look like? What does 1 year look like? And then over 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, what does the split look like? So a dishonest thing would be to not have a plan, but just to have a number and then try and focus on that number. Now, the number, you may be in a stress situation where the number for the next 3 months matters anything a lot more than the number for the next 3 years. You've just got to get through the hump that you're in. You've just got to get through the trading cycle that you're in. Well, that's the thing. Focus on that. Of course, you must do that. But where does it fit into the big picture? Because if you're 5% off at the beginning, you'll be 50% off by the end of 12 months. And then it's a very difficult thing to claw back. So we've said this many times, and when we're working with our clients, we have to remind them, not that they need reminding, but we have to remind them a goal is not a plan. And a plan is what gets it.
So I think it's an interesting sort of thought. You're right. The word dishonest is a strong word, but it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think I've got to hire someone to own the market intelligence. But if you don't change how the rest of your business works, that's just delegation, not a strategy. So you've got to change the business, how it works, and make sure you gather that intelligence and use that intelligence. And I also think a lot of people think sending one impressive report to a client and then trying to call it a new service is wrong. That's just a moment in time. That's not a model. You've got to have that constantly going over and over again. So I think the most dishonest thing a leader can do is really set that 3-year revenue number with no plan for who the business serves and why, and then call that a vision. I think it's understanding what you're servicing and why you're servicing that actually sets the vision, not your 3-year goal plan of the number and how much money you think you're going to make in those 3 years. And I think talking about that is again, I see this sometimes, and some are really good at this and most are really poor. Talking about this in leadership meetings, off-site meetings, etc. And I think unless you take that off-site meeting or those meeting notes and actually do something with them, and there's some really good agencies that do, but most of them don't, that off-site meeting or that client meeting or management meeting is just where good ideas go to die. Because you have loads of good ideas, but nothing actually gets done with them. So I think, you've got to do that. And I think telling your team that you want this and then never asking it for again is another thing that we do. I want you to do this, but then we never follow it up. There's no action to it. There's no change in the system. There's no training on it. And it then just becomes a one-off conversation. So I think the most dishonest thing is mistakenly thinking about our 3-year vision for actually building the first piece of information that sets you on that journey of that mission, of that vision that you want. And talking about it doesn't show up on your balance sheet. Actually going up and doing it and getting it done consistently eventually starts to show up on your balance sheet, because you start to win clients, you start to retain clients, and you go from that sort of average contact point, transactional relationship, to trust, then to loyalty, and then to advocacy. And I think that's the huge that we just don't get, because people still think at transactional levels that they've got loyalty or advocacy, and they're nowhere near. I mean, we're self-believing that. And yeah, we've talked about that a lot just recently, but I think that's the main thing. So here's a bit of an edgy one then. Okay. Is it possible that some leaders actually, that's a bit loud. Is it possible that some leaders actually prefer being the fastest to fill the job, because being seen as an expert means being challenged, and being asked hard questions is actually being accountable for having an opinion? And I think some leaders prefer to fill jobs fast rather than to have an opinion and turn things down.
Well, if you're talking about the leaders of the business, as in the founders, the CEOs, the MDs, whatever the size, I think the important thing is to work out what you're very good at the very beginning. So often, leaders of businesses have come from other trading businesses and thought, I can do this better myself. I can run my business. And then you end up with those leaders that are very good at strategy, at putting a plan together, winning plans, and those that are better at filling jobs. And they'd rather carry on filling the jobs. And if that's part of the plan, then that can work. That can work very well. I worked with a company that was founded by two guys, and one was just a brilliant filler of jobs. The skill was trying to get him to pass that knowledge on to others so the business could grow. But to start off with, that's what he did. It's where you get the point where leaders tend to hide behind filling jobs so that they're not doing other stuff that the business needs. They're not developing other services. They're not out with clients. And that's got to be a challenging thing. You need to find somebody else who could do that, because often the leader of the business is one of the more expensive people in the business. And filling jobs is an expensive business if you've got somebody earning, pick a number, 100K, as opposed to somebody earning 40K, whether you're the best leader or not. And when we're talking about recruitment, most companies have less than 10 people. So it's very unusual to find a business that has, say, 8, 9 people, where the leaders aren't involved in some way in filling some jobs, because it's how it is. But as long as that isn't masking what the business needs in terms of development, in terms of strategy, in terms of some of the marketing things we've been talking about, then I think that's fine. But it's important to have alignment at the beginning.
So I think filling jobs fast is safe. And no one's going to argue with a good CV and filling a job fast. No one's going to argue with that. But I think having a market opinion means someone might tell you that you're wrong or have a difference of opinion. And sometimes that might happen in front of a client or in front of a candidate. And I think most leaders fear that. And I've coached leaders who talk endlessly about wanting authority in their marketplace, and have never once published anything that could be disagreed with. And I think that's the bit you've got to challenge yourself, to challenge the marketplace and challenge the people out there, because that's what creates a conversation. If you think about some of the best debates and the best conversations, it's when two people have got a difference of opinion and they're both trying to win, and that's the best thing to do. So being an expert means being visible, and visible means taking risks. And some leaders would rather stay behind rather than expose themselves out to the marketplace and actually put an opinion out there. So if you've built a business that avoids being challenged on an opinion, then you haven't built a position of authority. You've built a very comfortable hiding place for your business. And I think that's an interesting sort of way of looking at it, that you're hiding from what's actually happening there. And the honest version of something I see constantly is leaders say they want to be seen as an expert, but they never once put that view in writing because someone might push back on it.
Right.
I'm an expert at this, I'm an expert at that. And I remember, you know, Adecco would pride itself on all the Adecco brands. You had to be in the top one or two in that country that you were in for the companies in the niche that you were in. And if you weren't, they would probably look to sell the business because you were they couldn't then claim that they were the number one recruitment agency in the world. And so you had to work really hard at being the expert in your marketplace and have experts' opinions. So staying busy with delivery is genuinely easier than sitting with a discomfort of being wrong in public, because people don't want to feel that. But if you challenge that, you know, bad press is equally good as good press. And people will have different opinions, and you've got to accept those opinions and challenge them. Okay. So the leaders who actually build authority make peace with being challenged early because the alternative is staying invisible.
Yeah, and sometimes I find this is a confidence thing because you are a leader or the leader. The expectation is that you're the best at everything there in the agency, and that isn't always true, and it knocks leaders' confidence. And I've worked with leaders who thinking they want me to do this, but I'm not sure I can, and it's a matter of peeling that back, finding out where the points for development are, and then building up that confidence. I mean, a great question that we would ask any leader when they tell us that they're an authority in their sector or in their business is how many times in the last week or month, you pick the day, how many times has the client called you for advice, for intelligence, for an update? And if the answer is, well, not many, then you're not the authority you think you are. And then it's about building a confidence back to make sure that you do become that authority.
I remember having to go to an interview for my directorship at Adecco and having an interview with four of the really big, large directors and other people in the room, etc. And I was asked a question, and would you rather be respected for your opinion or just never being wrong in front of us or in front of a client? Because I was very opinionated and I would say what I think. And I said that exactly. And I think it's always about your opinion and then standing by that because you can't have both.
No, no.
You can't have both. And most leaders have quietly chosen that sort of second one about not being wrong. Okay. But if you think about it daily, your clients are telling you that you're wrong because if your fill rate is less than 30%, and most recruitment agents in the UK, their fill rate is less than 30%,
Yeah, we know that.
the client is telling you that you're wrong. You're not different. You're not challenging the marketplace. And the clients know it. And because they've had to use four agencies constantly to fill their role, not because the role is hard, it's because they don't trust you to fill it on your own. And because they don't trust you to fill it on your own, it's because you've never been opinionated enough to go and tell them what's wrong with their recruitment process, what's wrong with the market, why they should come and use you, because we're too busy competing on the 95%, which everybody else is doing, and not competing on that 5%. And it's that 5% that differentiates you hugely. And part of that 5% is having an opinion and challenging clients and challenging people within the marketplace. And I think that's the only way to be. Sorry about that. Right. Final question then. Again, when I wrote this, I wrote this with two things in mind. Okay. So if two agencies have identical billing this year, but one of them is known as the people who fills our roles, and the other is known as the people who tell us about what's happening in your marketplace, which one is actually worth more in 3 years' time? And why would the answer surprise most leaders on this sort of conference or watching this on the playback, etc.?
Well, being an authority in marketing obviously adds value to your business. However, if it is at the expense of filling jobs, which is the core job for most recruitment companies, I'll accept that the bigger ones have lots and lots of different services, but lots of smaller niche agencies, they exist to fill jobs. The market is changing, they're going to have to change their services in some way. However, if you're not filling jobs, you're not going to exist. So the 3-year vision of being a market influencer and having all the right marketing and all the right business intelligence and the right board and all of that is first class. It's absolutely the way you should go. However, if you're not filling jobs, if you're not meeting the client needs and desires that you've got right now, you're not going to get there. And I've also seen companies spend a lot of money on their look and their feel and their offices and even training and developing their staff and all of this. And their fill rate is 1 in 9, 1 in 10. And that's not going to move your business on. Because if you're a supplier of skills, supplier of talent, from that base, you can develop your business into something more. But you've got to start with plan A. It's a little bit, without using necessarily in a World Cup analogy, if you don't score goals, you ain't going to win the game. You could be highly praised, but you're not going to win. So you've got to do the first thing that you're required to do first.
I think this question applies to the last 2 years, 18 months in the marketplace. The one with the market position will retain clients during the downturn. The one that just fills roles becomes an optional the moment hiring slows down. And I think buyers and investors don't pay for your last year's billings. They pay for the likelihood for those billings being repeated. An authority means that the likelihood is far higher that that's going to be repeated than anything else before. And the surprise is that it isn't about the size or sector. It isn't about the market. It's purely about whether the relationship survives without a live vacancy attached to it. And most leaders think their billing numbers is an asset. The asset is actually whether your client would miss you if you stop delivering tomorrow. And most wouldn't miss you because they've got other people that can deliver for them. So you've got to start to think how you make yourself irreplaceable within that marketplace. So I think identical billing tells this identical billings this year tells you nothing about which business survives in the downturn. That's the answer that most leaders don't want to hear. The surprising part isn't the answer, it's how few leaders ever actually ask themselves the question. How would you survive during a downturn? And if you address it now, even though the market's starting to creep up, then when the next downturn comes, you don't see the downturn. You just keep moving and keep moving forward. And we've seen that so many times in the last 2 years, haven't we, Dave? Identical agencies in identical marketplaces, okay, one on its knees and one is flying high in the sky. But same market, same conditions. And the difference is why. And the difference is the one that's got the authority is the one that keeps doing that. And I've seen agencies with brilliant numbers and zero resilience because their relationships were always transactional. And underneath that, you've got to think about why is that. So if your only reason your client uses you is that you're currently the fastest, you don't really have a business. You have a temporary advantage that any competitor with a faster process can take away from you next week, next month, next quarter. And I think that's the problem that we start to seeing now when AI comes in. And we said this a couple of weeks ago on one of the webinars, is that all the things that happen in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, etc., where recruiters adopted to those things, like I won't go from the Rolodex to a PC, etc., didn't really challenge us. AI is now challenging us in the marketplace because it can do things quicker, faster, etc. But if you're not adapting to those sort of things and adapting with authority, then you will be usurped by other people.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Ladies and gents, that's it for today. Thank you very much indeed. Next week, we've got a really interesting webinar. Next week, we've got Lead and Gain back. Lead and Gain help recruitment agencies in the UK open up their American marketplace. We did a webinar with them in October 2024. And so we're going to look at the difference between what is happening in 2024 and what is happening today, and whether or not the American market is still the market to really be going after if you want to extend your market reach outside the current market that you're on. So we've got that running up from there. So ladies and gents, thanks for your time. It's been much appreciated. Thanks for your kind words, everybody. Much appreciated. We look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yeah, next week. Have a good week, everybody.